Welcome back to Zaid Ibrahim Podcast. We are with Datin Azimah on talking about education in the country. Okay, Datin, I just want to come back to this English in schools. We know we have a dui bahasa policy, dua bahasa. On paper lah, sepatutnya there should not be a problem lah kalau kita boleh guna bahasa Inggeris, guna bahasa Melayu, fairly, competently, then we should not have a problem. But we do have a problem in terms of the use of language, English in school. So, can you please elaborate on this matter?
I think the Ministry of Education has been very careful to ensure that there is a balance between English and Bahasa Melayu in the system, and they've been very good with that. In the sense that English language plus other subjects in English must not exceed 50%.
50%?
Yep.
Oh.
It must stop there. It cannot exceed. Or rather, Bahasa Melayu must be more than 50%, and English language must be less. And that's fine. They've always kept with that, Again, even with PPSMI, then you still had science, maths, and English, but it was still capped at below 50%. And then, and of course, now with the dual language program, which we have now. I think the problem with English is that although I think we have progressed, at one time the argument was that the Japanese and the Koreans can do it and the Germans can do it. Why can't we? We can't, okay, because we haven't got the knowledge and we haven't got the translators. Okay, but that argument is less being heard now. I think every Malaysian now appreciates the importance of the English language. How we do it is still debatable. So in 2015, the Economic Council, under the Prime Minister's office then, were very concerned about employment of graduates, and they wanted a radical approach towards English proficiency. So they commissioned Pemandu to come up with a lab, because they thought that if you left it to the Ministry of Education, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to be adequate. Yes, I'm told. So Pemandu did a lab. They involved about 100 people from the industry. I was part of that. And then after that first stage, we went into part 2, whereby we deep dive what should be done. In 2009, there was already the policy of MBM MBI, memartabatkan bahasa Melayu dan memperkukuhkan bahasa Inggeris. So under that, we came up with 2 programs, the HIP, the Highly Immersive Program, which is English to be conducted informally in schools, e.g. At assemblies, during co-curriculum. The other more targeted approach was the dual language program, where science and maths could be taught and learned in the English language, but at parents' request. So this was the spirit of the dual language program, where parents' wishes are to be taken into account exactly as it is stated in the Education Act 1996. States that pupils must be educated according to the wishes of the parents.
Yeah.
So this is nothing new. So the minister herself needs to look at the Education Act 1996, which states this. And this is exactly what the parents are doing in the dual language program. What they have to do is fill up a form, say they want DLP and non-DLP. The school is supposed to accommodate, because it states in the guidelines which I have here, twice in 12.2.4 and 12.2.3a, it states where at least 15 students want DLP, they have to open up a class. But that is not what's happening in schools. In fact, parents are signing this form for DLP, and the principals are ignoring it. They say, we don't care that you want DLP, you will be put in a non-DLP class. whether you like it or not. This, I think, is going against the guidelines. Why have guidelines if you can't follow it?
Yes, yes.
So we're fine with the guidelines. The guidelines were written in 2020. We like what's in it. But unfortunately, what the minister has done is impose new conditions to the guidelines, which we think are unnecessary because it makes the running of DLP schools restrictive.
Mm.
We want, when we came up with the dual language program in 2015, we came up with three criteria rather. Parents' wishes, schools must be ready, and principal has a plan, comprehensive plan to conduct DLP classes. Three very simple criteria, which encourages every school to have at least one DLP class. But along the way, before it was launched in 2016, the Pejuang Bahasa again came into the picture. They said each school that wants to be DLP school must meet the national average for BM. And it was either we take it or it wasn't going to happen. So we were held to ransom.
Yeah.
So we had to take that criteria so that it could run. So now, unfortunately, on the high side, it appears that this BM criteria is not a good idea because it forfeits half the schools from applying to be a DLP school. And the ones they are depriving of are the Malays themselves.
And I just want to add, the lack of proficiency in Bahasa has nothing to do with your interest in language in English, surely.
Exactly.
You can be poor in Bahasa for other reasons.
Exactly.
So there may be other factors, I am sure, that cause the deterioration of our skill in Bahasa. Because I see that some of the people that I meet with, they cannot even speak proper Bahasa.
Yeah, so the guidelines, I want to stress, the guideline says national average for BM for the school. So as long as the secondary schools meets the national average at SPM level, and from primary school it meets the UPSR equivalent of BM, they can apply. But when the students, for instance, Standard 1, who go into the school, students who can barely read and write, they are assessed for Bahasa Melayu. Imagine that. They are assessed for Bahasa Melayu. So when you do well in your Bahasa Melayu, you are assumed that your English is bad. Then only you can go into DLP.
Yeah.
Or if your BM is weak, it is assumed that your English is strong, so you have to go to non-DLP, regardless of what the parent says. It is in the criteria, it's parents' wishes.
Yes.
So what we are saying to the minister and ministry is, do away with this BM assessment, because you're punishing these kids who are good English. These kids are good English and they can't go into a DLP class because the English is good. And they have to be in this non-DLP class until Form 5. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
I think it's a condemnation.
Yes. And I think, have you been able to meet the minister on this?
No, unfortunately, she is a minister who doesn't like to engage with stakeholders because not just Page, but other organizations have tried to meet her. She
Maybe she's not confident of herself.
I don't know. It's not for me to say. But I think
normally lah. My pengalaman ni, I'm an old man. Kalau orang tak suka berdepan tu, selalunya they have certain weaknesses in their system. Kalau orang yang berani, orang yang tahu what they're doing, they should not be worried about it. But this is why I just want to ask you. I also do understand. I want to come back to what the Prime Minister said. Because he said there must be people in the system who's in denial. Now, I want to ask the Prime Minister whether the Cabinet is in denial about the poor state of English.
Okay, first of all, no, I don't think the Cabinet is in denial about the state of English. I think they're quite smart people. But on the dual, talking about the cabinet, since you brought it up, on the dual language program, we actually wrote a memorandum to the cabinet, all 31 of them. On the 11th of January, I delivered 27 memorandums to the offices in Putrajaya. It took a whole day. The next day, I did the last 4 memorandums, only because these ministers were based in Kuala Lumpur. So 31 hand-delivered memorandums went to the ministers, followed by, over the weekend, emails to the SUSK, PTTK, and SUS. So that's over 90 emails, and not a single acknowledgement.
Yeah, not
So,
surprised.
I don't know, I'm surprised. Maybe you're used to it, Dato'.
I've written so many letters and opinion and suggestion, and even simple questions. I have never received a reply, because our government, that's their culture.
So anyway, the only emails that bounced back was from the rural and regional ministry. All the emails bounced back, so I don't know how the people connect with that ministry. So anyway, so that was then, and then we had a press conference to talk about the memorandum. Fantastic coverage by media. And then on the 17th and 18th, they had a cabinet retreat. Unfortunately, the topic of the dual language program did not arise, but I think, back to your question about denial, I don't think the cabinet is in denial, but the reason we send the memorandums to the cabinet ministers is because I think everybody who went to school should have an opinion on education. And even though that is not their ministry, the children will be affected. Their nieces and nephews will be affected, and even grandchildren, for the matter. So I think that they have to read my memorandum and influence the Minister of Education to look at our requests, which are very simple. And our requests are that we don't want that a compulsory non-DLP class, which she is imposing and is not in the guidelines. We want DLP classes and schools to expand.
It's very interesting for what you told me, because it looks like she's a very powerful figure. And I've never heard of her. I mean, with due respect, I don't know, because during my masa saya muda dulu, kalau you want to be Minister of Education, you got to be somebody very senior in cabinet. You got to be someone that is kind of recognized leader. Tun Razak himself, Education Minister, Mahathir, Education Minister, Tun Musa Hitam, those were the days when top leaders in UMNO selected. So when the Prime Minister appointed Fazlina, I tried to Google what's her background really, and as far as I can read, or I know from the notes, she's a lawyer. But there are 20,000 lawyers. I mean, it's no big deal. So she was an activist in children's welfare, ke apa begitulah, yeah, and a PKR wanita chief. So I don't know where's the qualification, to be honest with you, that she was elevated to such an important position. I don't understand. Perhaps the Prime Minister can explain, because you see, public office you got to explain to people. You got to be accountable for what you say and do and not do. And if you have a policy that's totally, quite clearly detrimental to the interests of the community, then you must defend that policy. You must engage. Yeah, sekurang-kurangnya. Yeah. So.
So I think it's one of these things. I mentioned to you about the Abdul Rahman Yaakob, going on national TV and announcing, Malay medium schools without consulting the cabinet. And another case was, making history SPM must pass. Tan Sri Muhyiddin made the announcement at UMNO General Assembly without consulting the Ministry of Education. Ministry were appalled.
Yeah.
And again we have this case. whereby she's insisting that there must be schools must sacrifice one class to learn science and maths and BM when nobody wants it. So I think things like this, which may appear trivial, um, the impact can be quite bad because, for instance, if a school has a small school, a small size school, for instance, has two classes at every level, two standard 1, two standard 2, etc. At the moment, it's 100% DLP because that's what the parents want. And in some schools since 2016, when the program was launched. So now she insists that come March, in the new academic year, one class has to be sacrificed, turned into a non-DLP class. So at that level, you have from 100% becomes 50%. That's standard 1. And it goes on and on. Yeah. So by the time in 6 years' time, you have 100% school becoming a 50% school.
So quite clearly, she is an ideologue. I don't know. From what you told me. I mean, someone, that has got very strong views about certain things which may not be useful for the country, but I will talk about it later. So, Datin, we're going to take a short break again. We'll come to the last part in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Yeah.